There are 4 things that are needed to make an engine go: suck, squish, bang, and blow. When the piston moves downward, it creates a vacuum to suck in the air and fuel. When the piston returns to top dead center, it squishes the air and fuel inside. The spark plug then sparks, igniting the mixture, propelling the piston downward. Finally, when the piston moves back up again, it expels all the exhaust. Then the process starts all over again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Today we are focusing on the bang. That's right, Dora is getting some new spark plugs, and some spark plug wires, and an ignition coil. Pretty much everything in the ignition circuit is being replaced. But why? For starters, the spark plugs currently in Dora are pretty worn out. Over time, the spark point on the spark plug degrades, causing poorer performance. Basically, spark plugs destroy themselves over time. Sounds kind of familiar. New spark plugs will just make things run better. The spark plug wires are being replaced because they are old and worn. The resistance of the wires has been affected, which in turn affects the spark plugs. Since every wire is different in length, the resistance will be different for each wire. Finally, the ignition coil is showing symptoms of being cracked. What I mean by that is when the moisture content in the air is high, the engine misfires until the ambient air around the engine is warm enough to dry out the moisture. So let's get down to business. There are a few tools you will need: a 5/8 inch spark plug socket, some extensions, a 3/8 ratchet, 1/4 inch ratchet, a 7mm and an 8mm socket, a flathead screwdriver, and a trim removal tool. Optional is a hose pliers to help remove the spark plug wires. Start by removing the spark plug wires from the ignition coil. It is good practice to take a picture or make a drawing of which wire goes where. Otherwise, the engine will not run properly afterwards. Next, remove the ignition coil. There are 2 nuts on the passenger side and 2 bolts on the driver's side to remove. On the furthest forward bolt, there is an RF dongle held in place by the bolt. Set it off to the side and don't forget to remount it. Install the new ignition coil. A little dab of dielectric grease on the wire connections never hurt anything. Remove the lower inner fender liners. This gives us much better access to the spark plugs. Pull the spark plug wire off of the plug. Use the spark plug socket to remove the spark plug from the engine block. The 2 ways I use to set the correct spark plug gap is with a spark plug gap disc and feeler gauges. Be sure to set the correct spark plug gap before installing the spark plugs. For this engine, the spark plug gap is 0.054 inches. If the gap needs to be shortened, firmly tap the spark plug electrode onto the work table. To increase the gap, pull back on the electrode. Install the new spark plug by hand before using the ratchet and torque it to 168 inch-pounds. Over-torquing can cause the threads to rip out, which is bad, and a whole new hurdle to overcome. Spark plug wires can vary widely from car to car and even from engine to engine. Some may be pre-numbered, others may be all the same length. For Dora, the old wires were all numbered. The new wires I bought are not. Match the new wire lengths to the old lengths as best as possible. Take the new spark plug wire and put a little bit of dielectric grease on each side of the connectors. Then install it to the new spark plug, making sure to feel the pop to know it is securely mounted. Run the new spark plug wire to the ignition coil. Use the reference picture or drawing from earlier to install it into the correct place. If you have been doing these spark plugs and wires individually, repeat this process for the rest of the spark plugs and wires. Reinstall the lower inner fender liners. Start the engine. If it runs well, good job. If not, then double check all your wire placements and connections. Take a test drive to ensure everything is working properly. One last thing, I'm going to take 2 of the best, longest old spark plug wires and throw them in my travel box as spares. Same thing with the spark plugs, I'll grab a couple of those as well. This is Rooster. Zap you later.